last night I was watching Ben Shapiro when he premiered this on YouTube, and there were a lot of things wrong with it. I only watched the first 40 minutes because after like the first 40 minutes, like everything that he says is kind of predicated on the stuff that he said before, which I already take issue with. So like responding to everything after that, at least from what I saw, would probably be just a waste of time, but we'll see. I'll see how everything is. So let's go ahead and start the video, I suppose, actually. Oh, and one thing that I will say before I start this video is that Ben Shapiro likes to add ads into his videos a lot. Like, this boy has got sponsors up to his eyeballs. It's crazy how many ads he'll go through in just one video. I'll try to skip through them, but if I get tired of doing that, we'll just listen to them. We will listen to the first ad because I think it's incredibly funny, because it kind of demonstrates the way that Ben Shapiro is as a commentator. So we'll go through that, and I'll explain that when we get to it.
Today's show is sponsored by ExpressVPN. Don't let others track what you do. Keep yourself safe at expressvpn.com/Ben.
I forgot there was even an ad at the very beginning. I'm not sure if this was the ad that I was going to commentate on.
And we'll get to all the news in just one moment, and the news week continues to be extraordinarily packed and devastatingly bad, basically across the board. We'll get to more of that in 1 second. First, a reminder, did you know that your family can save over $800 a year just by switching to Pure Talk from Verizon, AT&T, or T-Mobile? Think about it. What could your family do with an extra $800? You don't have to sacrifice coverage. Pure Talk has the exact same coverage, same bars as one of the big carriers, but they are going to charge you half of what you'd normally be paying one of those giant carriers. And you don't have to sacrifice customer service either. Their team is based right here in the United States. They're some of the nicest people you will ever talk to. Get unlimited talk, text, 2 gigs of data for just $20 a month. If you go over on data usage, they're not going to charge you for it. Right now, you're probably paying for unlimited data. You're not using unlimited data because it is not possible to use unlimited data. Instead, get 2 gigs.
Yeah, so this is kind of a nitpicky thing, I'll admit. But like just the way he worded this ad kind of irks me, because he's like, you're not going to use unlimited data, which I know it's supposed to be tongue-in-cheek, but like just the illogical like thought process that he has when he thinks of stuff like that. You're not going to use unlimited talk and text either, but it's still there. I don't know, it's stupid, I know, but like it just like this is, I think it's a good representation of how inconsistent Ben Shapiro can be, and you'll see that when it comes to more important stuff besides a stupid ass ad.
Gigs of data, plus have your mobile phone to 250 cell phone bill right now, and it's off your first month when you now. Okay, so here is the update on the news. The update on the news. Overnight, a Capitol police officer died from injuries that were sustained after clashing with the mob over at the Capitol building, according to NBC News. A U.S. Capitol police officer died Thursday after being injured in clashes with pro-Trump rioters in the Capitol the day before. Officer Brian Sicknick was injured while physically engaging with protesters Wednesday, returned to his division, and then he collapsed. He was taken to a hospital. He died about 9:30 p.m. on Thursday. Sicknick joined the Capitol Police in 2008. He's the 5th person to die from Wednesday's violent clash in Washington. Of course, there was a woman who was shot to death by Capitol Police during the middle of the riot, and then there were 3 other people who died of unspecified medical emergencies over the course of the riot.
So I actually read a post. It was on Reddit. It was on Destiny's subreddit. That said that like one guy died from falling off the wall. One guy died by a heart attack from tasing himself. One guy died because he was, or a girl died because she was I know this one is real. A girl died because she was trampled to death, while holding a "Don't Tread on Me" flag. And it like most of the deaths were like self-inflicted stuff. Now those other 2 deaths that I mentioned, I haven't fact-checked them. So I don't know if they really died from falling off a wall. I wouldn't be surprised. Or from tasing himself. Again, wouldn't be surprised. But like there was only There was the officer that died, the lady that died that got shot, and yeah, the other three, like, there was only 2 people that died in non-stupid ways. Like, there was only 1 person that got shot by the cops, and 1 person, which was a cop, that died due to, like, violence, purposeful violence.
His death will be investigated by the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington.
Ben Shapiro may not have known this at the time. It may not have been news when he recorded this.
Sicknick most recently served in the Capitol Police Department's first responder unit, according to a statement from the Capitol Police. News of the officer's death comes shortly after Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund resigned amid criticism of the department's response to rioters who broke through the barricades, vandalizing the building and clashing with police. Now, as we now know, we know that Mayor Muriel Bowser was not interested in having a vast police presence. We know that the feds were also concerned about ticking off the protesters or rioters or something, which is absolute insanity. This is a failure at every level. There needs to be a full investigation as to why there were not more officers on the grounds, why the response took hours on end. And all those videos that you've seen of the officers removing barricades in order to let people through, it was not in order to let people through. It was because they were consolidating their lines. This will become relevant a little bit later on in the...
Like, there will be some portions of this video that I agree with, and this one I do agree with. A lot of the videos that you see where it looks like police are just letting rioters inside of the Capitol, it's because they were just overwhelmed and they had to fall back. It was either fall back or fight a mob of rioters without the numbers and the equipment to do so. They just had to.
Program when we discuss the pathetic notion that the police treated these rioters with kid gloves because they were white. This has now become the talking point du jour of the Democratic Party.
Okay, so this is my first point that I'm going to kind of disagree with. I don't agree with the notion that they treated the rioters with kid gloves because they were white. I agree that the rioters were treated with kid gloves because they were right-wing rioters. Right-wing protesters, and I don't think that the individual cops, like on an individual level, was like, this is a right-wing group, so I'm going to treat them with kid gloves. I think, and this is just a theory, that whoever is in charge, whatever body of representatives is in charge of making sure there was enough security to be able to handle the number of people that were going to be at this protest. I think that person bought into the left-wing protests are violent and right-wing protests are not violent narrative, and they just understaffed because they didn't believe that it was going to end up in violent. They didn't believe it was going to end up violent because there were right-wingers who were protesting, which is completely stupid and naive. That is my opinion. And because of that, the police didn't have the people on the ground to be able to properly push back. Now, if they did have the people on the ground to properly push back, would they have? I don't know. But I'm fairly sure that had it been in a Black Lives Matter protest, that was going to be in the numbers that this protest was projected to be in, there would have been a much heavier police presence. Therefore, the police would have been more emboldened to immediately or near immediately use violent actions against protesters that got a little bit rowdy.
And it's disgusting. We'll get to that in a moment. First, other news. There are a bunch of Trump cabinet officials who have now resigned. Elaine Chao, who is the Secretary of Transportation and wife of Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, temporarily. She has now resigned her post. Also, Betsy DeVos resigned her post as well. Ms. DeVos said in a letter, "There's no mistaking the impact your rhetoric had on the situation," is what she said to President Trump. She said, "We should be highlighting and celebrating your administration's many accomplishments on behalf of the American people. Instead, we are left to clean up the mess caused by violent protesters overrunning the U.S. Capitol in an attempt to undermine the people's business. That behavior was unconscionable for our country. There's no mistaking the impact your rhetoric had on the situation. That is the inflection point for me. Naturally, the left is not meeting any of these people with open arms. They're not suggesting, and neither moderates, neither the media, nobody is suggesting that the folks who are resigning from the Trump administration over this incident ought to get any credit for doing so. Instead, because they were in the Trump administration in the first place, the idea is that they are very bad. And this lends itself to the second narrative of the day, which is that if you voted for Trump, if you're conservative in any way, if you don't believe any of the woke nonsense pushed by the left, this means that you are part of the problem. You are equivalent to the people who rioted and broke into the Capitol building. Now, let me be clear about
who is pushing outside of like online lefties, outside of like the Twitterverse and the very left wing of the party, online commentators that are in the very left wing of the party, who is pushing this narrative? I don't think that like that is a very mainstream narrative. My opinion on this is that there are consequences for your vote. And if you vote for somebody like Donald Trump, if you still support somebody like Donald Trump, knowing all the atrocities that he has committed, then yeah, you are pretty bad. At least the consequences of your actions can be pretty bad. Now, the thing is that I don't think that most Trump supporters are legitimately bad people. I think that most Trump supporters are just are living in a different reality than most liberals. I know this because every single Trump supporter I've ever talked to seems to not even know like the facts surrounding whatever opinion that they have. One example of this, and obviously this is just an anecdote, but I was talking to a Trump supporter about children in cages, and of course they throw out that who built the cage is nonsense. That whataboutism. But as we got more into the topic, they didn't realize that Trump was separating families regardless of if they were suspected of being child traffickers. Like they didn't realize, this person didn't realize that Trump administration was separating children from their parents regardless of if their parents were suspected of, or whichever adult they crossed the border with was suspected of abusing that child. They thought that every single child that was separated was a suspect of being a coyote or abusing the child in some way. So a lot of these people, they aren't bad people. They just live in different realities than we do. And don't get me wrong, some of them are bad people. But overall, I think that these are just people that have been fooled by people like Ben Shapiro, like Tim Pool, like OAN and Newsweek Max. What's up, Justin? How are you doing, man?
Something. The vast majority of people who were at the protest are not even equivalent to the rioters who broke into the Capitol building. The vast majority of people who went to that protest believed something that was not true about the voter fraud and voter regularity allegations made by Trump. Many of them believed something that wasn't true about the congressional ability to overturn the election. But they were there because they believed, I think, in certain patriotic fashion, that the election ought to be upheld in a true and proper way. Now, their definition of true and proper.
So this is going to be something that I get into later on in the stream when I talk about my rioting and my response to the DC riots. It's something that I think a lot of people on the left are kind of missing in this conversation. So I'm going to try and bring it up today.
Proper, I don't think was factually based, but those people were not the people who were committing acts of criminality. It's about a couple thousand people probably broke into the Capitol building, and to equate even the tens or hundreds of thousands of people who were at that rally with Trump to the people who broke into the Capitol building would be conflating everybody in a way that's not true. So certainly it's...
Need a professional website? I created one for our startup using Wix. Let me show you how I did it.
It's even more true that people who were not at the rally, who did not believe what Trump was selling or what Josh Hawley was selling, all the people who did not believe that the election was stolen, and certainly all the people who voted for Trump are not to blame for what happened here, yet that is the narrative that is being drawn by the media.
Wait, he's saying right here that a lot of the people at the rally did not believe that the election was stolen. I would wager that most of the people at that rally, the mass majority of the people at that rally, believed that the election was stolen. That's why you had the Stop the Steal or Fight for Trump chants that were happening. That's just not true, Ben. Most of those people believed that the election was stolen. As a matter of fact, I think it's like 80% of Republicans believed that the election was stolen. Like, what are you talking about? And to the extent that there were people there that didn't believe that the election was stolen, a lot of them were probably people like me that was just there to try and live stream or record the election or the riot.
Every good conservative is now being lumped in with the people who decided to violate the heart of the democracy. And by the way, it is more, I'm hearing some rumblings on the right today. Well, they just wrecked a building. What's the big deal? I mean, BLM wrecked buildings all throughout the summer. And BLM not only wrecked buildings, they put businesses out of business. I mean, Congress was back in session by the evening. There's truth to that. It also happens to be the fact that this was an insurrection.
So let's talk about BLM just for a hot second. If the conservatives actually cared about businesses that were wrecked by BLM, they would be offering up like governmental solutions that do not involve trying to get in the way of BLM protesting. Most of BLM's protests were peaceful, and the ones that weren't did do real harm to a small amount of businesses. But if the conservatives actually cared about that, they would be trying to advocate for something like governmental help for those businesses that were wrecked in the riots. Something like disaster relief funds for those businesses. That would be a much more better solution than like trying to demonize an entire civil rights movement because these businesses got wrecked. These handful of businesses got wrecked.
Insurrection, because this was an overt attempt to stop the business of government from going forward. Now, it's not a coup, as some people have been defining it, because the military was not involved. There was no official move to attempt.
Military does not have to be involved in order for it to be a coup. At least, as far as I am aware, it doesn't have to be involved. You could call those people a militia group. They were a group of armed people. Like, they could definitely be called a militia group.
To remove the senators. There was no official attempt to actually overturn the election. That actually didn't happen. Okay, but the basic notion here that
it doesn't have to be an official, like, what do you mean by official attempt? Do you mean that, like, Congress didn't try to overturn the election? Because there were some congressmen that were objecting to the vote. Or do you mean that, like, what do you mean by official attempt? They were attempting to overturn the election, for sure. That's what they want. That's their end goal.
It was not a big deal. That obviously is not true either. So as always, many things can be true at once. But the one thing that is certainly true is that there's about 90% unity in this country. I would assume higher, maybe 95% unity. That breaking into the Capitol building and running roughshod through that building is bad. That is a problem.
I would like to see the polls on that. I would agree that it's a large number, but he's just pulling these numbers out of his ass. I seriously doubt, like, this hasn't been polled yet.
You'll see the left is now refusing to acknowledge that because the left sees a way to make a political gain here. And the way to make a political gain is to take...
What were you guys doing during BLM?
The bad people who broke into the Capitol building and did violence and attacked police officers and lumped them in with literally everybody on the right. So those are
that is exactly what you guys did to BLM, a movement that resulted in over 90% of the protests being peaceful, and many of the protests that got non-peaceful was instigated by cops. You guys, they're using just because people are holding them accountable for their hypocrisy. Yeah, exactly. You guys lumped in the BLM protests to all of those riots.
The two dueling narratives that we're going to get from the left over the coming months, over the coming years, it's going to have significant ramifications for your life. Because what they're going to do is they're going to suggest, one, that every bad thing is part and parcel of the white supremacist nation that is the United States. A point made by both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris yesterday. These were the captains of unity. They're going to bring the country together, right? Joe Biden keeps saying unity, unity,
it's
unity.
Not an excuse.
And then he turns around and parrots, Okay, so that's point number one. And then narrative number two is that everybody on the right is guilty for what happened. That if you voted for Trump, you knew this was going to happen. This is part and parcel of it. You wanted this to happen. This is part and parcel of what Trumpism was.
I've already
right? Simply voting against the left, simply voting against Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and AOC and Ilhan Omar and all the rest of the crew. That doing that meant that you were okay with what happened at the Capitol building. That is the second narrative. And that, of course, is going to lead to censorship, as we'll get to. Okay, well, the big news of the day amid all of this is that the White House acknowledged that President Trump had lost the election. Again, the reality is that Trump should have done this months ago. Okay, he had every opportunity to explore every legal option. Once the Electoral College voted, we were done. Okay, once the states had certified their votes within the safe harbor provision by law, there was no way to overturn the results of the election. Plus, once again, I know this is unpopular, but it happens to be the truth. The Trump campaign did not provide the necessary evidence to overturn any of the electoral results in any of those states. They just didn't. They had their hearings. They had their court hearings. In many states, they didn't even allege that there was voter fraud. That includes Pennsylvania. Okay, this election was over after the Electoral College voted. Okay, just as purely technically as possible. After the Electoral College voted, the election was over. Okay, but it is good that the White House has now acknowledged that fact. So yesterday, Kayleigh McEnany, the White House press secretary, she got up and she condemned the attack on the Capitol building.
I am here to deliver this message on behalf of the entire White House. Let me be clear. The violence we saw yesterday at our nation's Capitol was appalling, reprehensible, and antithetical to the American way. We condemn it, the president and this administration, in the strongest possible terms.
You had your chance to condemn, like, to stop this a long time ago. Wait, you could have stopped with your BS rhetoric.
It is unacceptable, and those that broke the law should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Okay, and everybody was asking, okay, so where's Trump in all this? Why doesn't Trump say something? Well, last night, Trump did say something after his Twitter account was reinstated.
They gave us so much shit on the left because we rioted after George Floyd. Then they try to compare the George Floyd protests to them running into the Capitol building. Like, those two are at all similar. There are instances, I think, where you can compare the two. I think that comparing the two is probably fair. But, like, if you do a proper comparison, yeah, if you do a proper comparison, you will see that, like, the left is like in the right. Like, the left is the ones that are, like, on the right side of history here. The right also, the left also has like facts and data to back up their grievances, whereas the rioters don't have anything to back up their grievances.
He put out a 2-minute, 30-second video in which he acknowledged that the election was over and that he had lost and that Joe Biden would be inaugurated on January 20th. He pledged himself to a peaceful transition of power, and he ripped into the rioters.
Like all Americans, I am outraged by the violence, lawlessness, and mayhem. I immediately deployed the National Guard and federal law enforcement to
I don't think it's true that he immediately deployed the National Guard.
secure the building and expel the intruders. America is and must always be a
I mean, like, if he immediately deployed the National Guard, I would have seen much more of an officer presence on the ground, like, for in the time that I was there. Like, okay, so I didn't get to the Capitol building until after they had breached it the first time. Yeah, Pence deployed the National Guard. That's what I've heard, yeah. I haven't actually looked it up, but that's what I've heard. But I didn't get there until after they breached it the first time. And then I stayed for a good, like, 30 minutes at least. No, longer than that. My video was like 30 minutes long, besides what I cut out. And it took me time to get up to the top of the scaffold where before I started recording. Took me a lot of time. I had to get through crowds and like monkey bar my way up there. So, like, that's just a flat out lie.
nation of law and order. The demonstrators who infiltrated the Capitol have defiled the seat of American democracy. To those who engaged in the acts of violence and destruction, you do not represent our country. And to those who broke the law, you will pay.
Oh, this is a deep fake, by the way. That actually wasn't Trump. I saw it on Twitter.
Okay, and then President Trump went on to acknowledge that he had in fact lost the election and that Joe Biden was going to be inaugurated.
Now Congress has certified the results.
Wait, hold on. Is this the same speech that he was like, you guys? No, that was when he was like, he told them to go home, wasn't it? This is the after speech. But yeah, he was like, you guys are special. You have been aggrieved greatly, but go home. And now he's doing this. Also, apparently there was like a jump cut in this speech. There's some theory that like he went off script during like in the middle of that jump cut, and they were just like, no, President, you can't say that. But I don't know. I haven't actually heard the whole speech, but that would be hilarious if that was the case.
A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th. My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power.
Oh, where was that focused in November when you lost the election?
This moment calls for healing and reconciliation.
Okay, in just a second, we're going to get to the response by the left to all of this. So now there's unity, right? Unity should break out, right? We now have widespread unity across the land. Rioting in the Capitol building is wrong. People should pay legally for breaking into the Capitol building, for threatening duly elected senators, congresspeople, the vice president of the United States, for attacking police officers. One police officer is dead, right? There's widespread agreement about all of these things, right? The president has now acknowledged that he lost the election. He has committed himself to a peaceful transfer of power, which, again, should have happened weeks ago, but it's good that he's doing it now, obviously. So this should be a time of unity, right? This should be a time when we all come together, because we all agree there will be a transition of power on January 20th. The election has been legally constituted. Attacking the Capitol building is bad, right? Like, all of these things are perfectly obvious to, when I say the vast majority of Americans, I mean nearly all Americans at this point, right? The country's ready to move forward. So you think the left is going to allow this opportunity to pass untaken advantage of? I think not. Every crisis is an opportunity when it comes to the left, and that includes the so-called unifying Biden administration. We'll get to that in just one moment, because this is really, truly gross stuff. We'll get to that in a moment. First, let's talk about something that's not gross. Let's talk about something wonderful, something happy, something distracting. I'm talking now in the Shapiro household. We break out our Presto stufflers. Be straw stuffed waffles, fill with stufflers from scratch. Awesome product. Buy now, 4% off and free shipping. Okay, so again, this could have been the moment, right? The moment where we all came together, because we're moving on, right? I mean, the Trump administration is done in less than 2 weeks, right? It's now January 8th. The inauguration is January 20th. We have 12 days until the inauguration. And Trump has now pledged that he is going to hand over power peacefully, which of course he should, since every single president in the history of the United States has done so, going back to George Washington, right? And he has acknowledged the results of the election. He has acknowledged that the Electoral College has voted and done its work.
Oh,
So
get on with it. Holy
we're done with the
crap.
rioting. Because the reality is that, number one, the police are actually going to do their jobs at this time. They're going to be provided with the sort of numbers they need in order to quash all of this. And there's widespread sentiment on the right that this was deplorable and horrible and bad and gross in every way, that you don't get to break into the Capitol building and threaten congresspeople and attack police officers and do all this kind of stuff. Frankly, I think there was an enormous amount of shock on the right that people who even identified as right-wing would do this sort of stuff. I mean, you'll remember back a few months ago, the typical thought on the right was that if Biden lost, that there would be riots in the streets, which, by the way, certainly would have happened. But then if Trump lost, there probably would not be any of that. So I think a lot of people on the right were duly shocked to see what happened the other day. And I don't think they're wrong to be shocked to see what happened the other day, obviously. Okay, so,
But the people on the left have been screaming, apparently into the void, that this man and his rhetoric, being the president of the United States, is dangerous. And his sycophants are dangerous. For months, years probably, I'm sure. We have been screaming into the void about how dangerous this is. But the people on the right just couldn't see it somehow. I just don't understand.
That means that there's widespread consensus that bad things are bad and that good things are good and that time moves on and that there will be a new president on January 20th, right? This would be the moment when Joe Biden should come out and he should say, we're all in agreement. This is a dark day for the country.
Sure.
Now we can move forward together because we all agree that people who violate criminal law should go to jail. Instead, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris decided to go precisely the opposite direction. They decided that they were going to rip open wounds for political gain, which is just awful behavior. Awful behavior. Okay, it is.
Again, what did y'all do during the George Floyd protests? I mean, the president ran on Law and Order because of the George Floyd protests. It was Antifa dressed as Trumpsters. Oh, fucking course it was, Ben. I mean, yeah, I mean, so I like to give people credit where credit is due, though. He's got, like, some reasonable takes. But, like, the rest of it's just dog shit.
It's terrible because, again, these people are going to be in charge.
Like this take that he's about to give out now is pretty dog shit.
Of the executive branch of the federal government for the next 4 years, and they're signifying that in a moment when we could all come together, at a moment when, as they say, that, in their belief, the nightmare is over, bright new day dawning, and all this stuff, right? This is the Biden line. Their claim could have been, okay, well, now we're moving forward in unity, arm in arm. This sort of stuff can't happen again. But here's the problem. The left has allowed this sort of stuff to happen for months, just in a different context. Right? The left, for months, catered to Black Lives Matter rioters and to Antifa rioters in
Okay, so we'll start right here. The left has not been doing this sort of shit for months. Most of the left, especially the mainstream left, has been saying that they do not agree with the riots, that they agree with the protests, and that they should be keeping it peaceful. Furthermore, rioting in a city, in a random city, is so much different than breaking into the Capitol building. It is so much different. Breaking into the Capitol building and halting a step of our democracy and attempts to overturn the results of an election is so much different than rioting in a city to express your anger about the way black people get treated or minorities get treated in America. Those two things are on whole different levels. And yes, the rioting is bad in both cases. But what the Trumpsters did in D.C. is on a whole other level.
Portland, for months they suggested that federal officers on the ground in Portland were actually creating the problem, even though the riots pre-existed, the federal officers in Portland, and then continued after the federal officers left.
What he's talking about here is in Portland, when Trump sent the federal troops into Portland and just made the rioting worse. That's what he's talking about. And his argument is that people are trying to say that the federal officers made the rioting worse, even though there was rioting before the officers got there and there was rioting after the officers got there. And this is just the kind of flawed logic that Ben Shapiro likes to use to try and make his points. It can be both true that there was rioting before and after the federal officers got there, and the federal officers being there made the rioting worse. That could be a sequence of events that is true. Rioting could be at level 3. Federal officers get there, it could be at level 5 because the federal officers, and then when they leave, the rioting continues, but it's at like a level 4. I don't know why he does, like, he thinks that is a sound line of logic.
So Joe Biden decided that it was time to actually polarize the country still further, because every crisis is an opportunity. So Biden gave a speech yesterday in which he attacked Trump, and he didn't just suggest that what Trump had done over the last couple of months was really bad. Instead, what he suggested is that Trump had launched an assault on our democracy from the very beginning of his administration, right? So now the implication is that anyone in either election, 2016 or 2020, who supported Trump should have known that this sort of stuff was going to happen, should have known that this was the way that things were going to end. Everyone is guilty. Everyone is guilty. Here's Biden effectually condemning half the country.
I wish we could say we couldn't see it coming, but that isn't true. We could see it coming. The past 4 years, we've had a president who's made his contempt for our democracy, our Constitution, the rule of law clear in everything he has done. He unleashed an all-out assault on our institutions of our democracy from the outset. And yesterday was but the culmination of that unrelenting attack.
Okay, well, I mean...
So, Donald Trump was trying to claim voter fraud in 2016 when he won. So technically what Joe Biden just said there is true. From the onset, he did attack our democracy with his rhetoric. Two, he's not implicating Trump supporters in that, like Ben Shapiro is claiming. So I don't know where he's getting that from. He's just saying that we saw this coming because we knew what kind of person Trump was because we listened to the things that he was saying. Not only that, okay, so Ben Shapiro is framing this as Donald Trump is giving up on the voter fraud stuff now, and it is time for unity. But now the left is trying to drive a wedge, trying to use this riot as a political opportunity to gain political capital. And they're dividing the country because of this. But that is like the equivalent of a bully, like punching you in the arm over and over and over and over and over and over again. And then you turn around and sock him in the face and you're getting ready to punch him some more. And then he's like, wait, no, I just want peace. And then when you punch him again, he tries to be like, well, I wanted peace. Like, I want it to come together. I want to be friends. That's not how this works. You can't just, like, try and undermine our democracy. And then like, when it fails and it makes you look bad, try and come together and try and make peace. Like, what kind of logic is that? No, there should be consequences for your actions. Both with the people who are in the riot, but also the elected officials and the talking heads that stoked the flames without any evidence of voter fraud. Those people should be held liable in one way or another.
Let's be realistic about this as well. There were folks on the left cheering on the 1619 riots, cheering them on. Right? Nicole Hannah-Jones said she was proud that these were the 1619 riots.
I don't know what the 1619 riots are.
And people were burning down businesses and assaulting people, and in some cases, killing people. In the case of David Dorn, the ex-police officer in St. Louis, the attacks on our institutions are not on one side here. And the implication here, of course, that Biden is attempting to draw is that if you voted for Trump because you liked his policies or because you didn't like what the left was presenting, then you were complicit in this because you should have known all along that it was going to end with people breaching the Capitol building in an incident.
That is not what Joe Biden was saying. Joe Biden was saying that it was easy to see coming at some point. But he's not saying that if you voted for Trump, you should have seen this coming. If you still support Trump after this, yeah, there's something a little bit wrong with you. You definitely have some responsibility to bear.
That has no historic parallel in the last.
I mean, if you supported Trump, like after kids in cages and his botched response to coronavirus and trying to deport dreamers and killing Soleimani and getting out of the Iran, like if you supported him after all of these awful ass things that he's done, then yeah, you bear responsibility for your support of this awful leader.
Last 50 years. I mean, like, what? Okay, so the only goal there, what's the goal there? What's the goal there? Like, what's he attempting to do? What he's attempting to do, pretty obviously, is polarize the country so that he can suggest that everybody who agrees with him is on the side of the angels and everybody who doesn't disagree with him is on the side of the people who breached the Capitol. That's what he's attempting to do. But he goes even further, Joe Biden. He goes even further because it's important now not to polarize us only along political lines, but along racial lines. So there was this woke bull talking point that was going around yesterday. It was rocketing around cable news. It was rocketing around the internet. Every NBA player was tweeting it out. And this nonsense point was the idea that if these had been Black Lives Matter rioters who had tried to break into the Capitol building, there were...
Okay, so one thing I would really love to point out right now is that just because you are defending, like you're saying that if this was Black Lives Matter protesters, then X, this isn't a racial thing. Black Lives Matter protesters aren't just black. So I'm not really sure why you think this is making it a racial thing. If he was saying if this was black people that were rioting, then cops would have been harder on them, then yes, that they are making it a racial thing. But if they are saying that if this was Black Lives Matter, no, this is a movement thing. This is saying that the police is in favor of one movement more so than the other, at least on some level.
There have been mass carnage and mass death, and the police officers treated everybody with kid gloves up on Capitol Hill the
They did. They definitely did.
other day.
I was there after the first breach, and to the extent that I felt any pepper spray in the air, it was coming from Trump supporters spraying the cops. I saw it. I caught it on camera. So, yeah. They treated them with kids' gloves, for sure. Now, it could have been because of their inability to actually move in on them until they got reinforcements. But those protesters, those rioters, were treated with kids' gloves.
Now, this is a lie. I mean, it's just an overt lie. It's a lie, number one, because the Capitol Police did not treat people with kid gloves the other day. I mean, according to reporters on the ground, ranging from Tina Wen over Vanity Fair to Julio Rosas over Town Hall, from the left to the right, there's widespread acknowledgement the police were firing tear gas at people, the police were involved in physical altercations.
At some point, they were firing tear gas. It wasn't while I was there. And I was there towards the end. Like, I was there close to curfew.
With people. The police were drawing their weapons on people. A woman was shot to death in the halls of the Capitol.
It took that woman to be within physical threat range to our elected officials before she got shot. That person, the person who shot her, was defending our elected officials from a riot, like a swarm of people coming in. Like a woman got shot. Like, yeah, she was in like threat range of our senators.
That is not treating with kid gloves. And all that video of the police removing barricades, they're removing barricades because that is typical security protocol. If you don't want the barricades used against you, and if you cannot consolidate your lines, and you don't have enough officers. People who are suggesting, by the way, why weren't there more arrests made on site? Because there weren't enough police officers in the first place. When you
That's true.
arrest somebody, the police officer has to leave with the person they are arresting.
Well, you can arrest somebody and leave them, but for the most part, that's true.
Also, all these people were on tape. Watch, in the coming days, I'm sure there will be dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of people who are arrested for their activities in the Capitol building. I'd imagine there will be hundreds of people who are arrested for what they did in the Capitol building.
And I
And as for
can't
the other
wait.
side of that coin, that BLM was treated with some sort of market viciousness by the police throughout the country, that's just a lie. It's not true.
It's
Washington,
true.
D.C. had widespread rioting for days.
This is what I mean at the beginning, that we live in different realities. There wasn't widespread rioting. 90% of the over 90% of the protests were peaceful. There were thousands of protests. So, like, that's just not true. If anybody that's on Ben Shapiro's side on this right now wants to come in and talk to me about this, I would love to have you. We can look over our studies and our sources and determine what the actual truth is. But from what I've seen, from the people that studied this, mass majority of BLM protests were peaceful. And there was a study done by, oh crap, I forgot what they were called. I wanted to look it up today. I couldn't really find it, so I decided I'd look it up some other day for my next stream. But there was a recent study that found that, generally speaking, the police do tend to use physical force against left-wing protests more often than they do right-wing protests. It's not a peer-reviewed study. It's a brand new study, so it hasn't had a chance to be peer-reviewed yet. But, like, is that really surprising? I guess to people like Ben Shapiro it is, but still.
Days and weeks. And widespread. People running roughshod through the streets, breaking into stores, stealing things, assaulting people.
See, there was widespread protests, but not widespread looting and rioting.
We saw all the videos at the time. You know how many rioters were killed by the police during the Washington, D.C. protests? 0. There were more people who were killed during the Capitol,
I like how he narrows the amount of people that were killed during the BLM protests to just the one Washington, D.C. protest, instead of, like, looking at BLM as a whole.
the Capitol storming than were killed during the Washington riots. By the way, I don't see anybody painting a street in Washington, D.C., QAnon. I don't see anybody painting a street in Washington, D.C., Stop the Steal. And yet when Black Lives Matter riots took over Washington, D.C., when they burned a church near the White House, when they did all that stuff, the mayor of D.C., Muriel Bowser, ordered that the words Black Lives Matter be painted in giant yellow...
Okay, so when he said... This is so funny. Hold on, let me let him finish his thought.
...letters visible from space on public streets. She ordered that a plaza be renamed Black Lives Matter Plaza. Every corporation in America woke scolded its own employees and told them they needed to post black squares in solidarity with the idea that America...
So when he said people weren't running around... So he's talking about the Capitol Hill protest. He's like, people weren't running around painting Black Lives Matter on the streets. And then he goes on as an example of somebody painting Black Lives Matter on the streets to talk about an elected official who ordered that there be painted Black Lives Matter on their street, on Black Lives Matter Plaza. Like, he made it like there was a bunch of graffiti, which there was for sure, a bunch of graffiti, bunch of public public buildings and streets and signs defaced with Black Lives Matter propaganda, for sure. But like, just this line of logic, like he going from one thing to another is just baffling to me. Like, how does he think that this is a good way to present your argument? And not only that, there is a huge difference in people doing graffiti and people storming the Capitol building. Like, he's saying that people this Capitol Hill protest was more okay than the Black Lives Matter protest because people at Capitol Hill weren't spray painting shit. Like, where is your head at?
It's a systemically racist country. Politicians, from right to left, put out these nonsensical statements about how America was cruel and vicious with regard to black Americans. Meanwhile, police were defunded in cities across the country or told to stand down. Entire city streets in Seattle were turned over to the tender predations of the folks of BLM and Antifa. The city of Los Angeles was shut down for a week. Rodeo Drive was closed at 1 p.m. so that BLM rioters could run roughshod through the city. Melrose Avenue was burned. So you're telling me...
But you know what he's talking about right now? Aside from like shutting down the police, I don't know what he's talking about there. I would have to look into it. But when he says things like police were defunded, Black Lives Matter was painted by the New York mayor, things like that, what he is talking about is the elected officials responding to the protests and the grievances of the Black Lives Matter people. That's what he's talking about. There is nothing wrong with elected officials responding to the grievances of people who have legitimate grievances. But what would the results be if our elected officials responded to the grievances of the people that were protesting at Capitol Hill? What would the result be? An overturning of our democratic election. That's a little bit different, don't you think? Yeah, I don't know what he's talking about when he says shut down the city so they could protest, or shut down the police. I know that some of the police officers were told not to like physically engage with peaceful protesters. If that's what he's talking about, I know that the Charlottesville protests that I attended, the police were escorting us instead of like trying to shut us down. Those are all good things, though. I would have to look at exactly what he's talking about, and I don't think it's really worth it because I feel like what he's doing is he's like, because he said this city shut down for the protesters. This city got burnt down. I have a feeling that those two are like totally two different cases. But I don't know. He could like have like one example of where the city mayor made a bad decision to like tamper their police, and then the riot burnt some buildings in the city. Or he could just be conflating two different scenarios. I'm not really sure. I don't really care enough to look it up, but we can. Yeah.
Either the cops were vicious and brutal with BLM rioters and protesters. In what way? In what way? And as for the media.
In what way? Did you not? Lafayette Square. They tear gassed a bunch of peaceful protesters so Trump can hold a Bible upside down. The man that got pushed down, whose head hit the pavement, blood came from his ears. The people getting hit with batons, the tear gas of peaceful protesters, like shit like that happened. What do you mean? In what way? Were we watching the same Black Lives Matter protests? I don't think we were.
Treated these people as though they were...
That, or we were watching the same thing and we were processing the information differently. I don't know what's going on here, but holy shit.
Heroes. Chris Cuomo asked, why should protests be nonviolent? Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, she said, they're supposed to make you uncomfortable. That's the goal here. And the entire culture swung behind BLM.
Protests are supposed to make you uncomfortable. That is why the left doesn't like BLM. Or, I'm sorry. That is why the right doesn't like BLM. It's a massive movement that points out facts about reality that makes them uncomfortable. They are trying to claim that it's because of the rioting, the burning, the looting. We all know that's not true. Because when you look at the statistics, most of them were peaceful. When you look at them, the right, by them I mean the right, calling Kaepernick shit for kneeling, thus drawing attention to this thing that makes them uncomfortable, they don't, it's When they talk about like the NBA, what is it that they did? I forgot what were they the ones that came out with their hands up or something? Hands up, don't shoot. That could have been the NFL also. But all of those things, it was you should be playing football, not talking about politics and shit like that. Those were peaceful protests that the right had problems with. And the root of the right's problems with BLM is not that there were riots. That could be a part of it, but it's got to be a small part of it, and it cannot be more than like 6% of the problem, because there were not there because like 94% of the protests were peaceful. It was because they were being forced to reckon with a set of facts that made them uncomfortable.
I was there. The attempt to gaslight us here by suggesting that everybody was irreproachably tough on BLM is such nonsense. It's garbage. There were videos of police officers kneeling with the protesters, kneeling with them. Don't give me the police officers at the Capitol building, one of whom died, 16 of whom were...
Yeah, and there was a police officer that took a selfie with the rioters. Like, what? You can come up with one-off anecdotes all you want. For every anecdote you have of a police officer being supportive of Black Lives Matter protests, I can come up with an anecdote of police officers being overly brutal to Black Lives Matter protesters, and I can come up with an anecdote of the police being friendly with right-wing protesters. Like, okay.
Were injured. That those police officers were being super duper kind to these people because they were white. There were police officers who were kneeling.
Again, not many. I mean, I'm sure there are people that are claiming this, but when you say that the police officers are more brutal towards the Black Lives Matter protesters, this isn't a race thing. It's a movement thing. So you're turning it into a race thing right now, Ben. Nobody you've mentioned, nobody that you put on screen, nobody who you quoted has made it a race thing. You're the one that's making it a race thing.
With the people who were calling them systemically racist. There were mayors who were going out into crowds of people who were declaring that they were representatives of an evil system and kowtowing.
That's true.
To them.
Yeah, that's the elected officials. Elected officials trying to mend the grievances of their people. There's not a problem with that.
There were white people who were doing,
unless mending those grievances would lead to like awful things, like overturning an election, a Democratic elected leader.
Acts of supplication before Black people all over the country. People literally on their knees in a mode of repentance to Black people, even though they never sinned against a Black person. And yet BLM is the victim.
Ben Shapiro obviously does not know what systematic racism is. I would love to be able to talk to Ben about systematic racism. I have a feeling it would go a little something like this. Well, there's no laws on the book that makes it to where Black people are oppressed. And then I would have to go into things like implicit biases, things like redlining in the past, how the past explicit racism that was on the books affect Black people today. I would have to go into how the legal system is set up and still somewhat, for most part, set up to keep minorities down. Like, there's a whole slew of things that I would have to go into that Ben Shapiro either doesn't understand or pretends not to understand in order to be able to explain what systematic racism is to him. And all he is going to have is, well, there's no laws on the book.
Victim here? Somehow you turn this into a racial thing? How? And the only answer is, when it comes to the left, there's always just a couple of arguments. And I say that this whole situation has resulted in a couple of arguments from the left. Right? One is that America is systemically racist.
It's so funny that, like, I pretty much just said the same thing about him. He's claiming this about the left, but I pretty much just said the same thing about him, except for I was able to go, like, way deeper into my argument than he is going to be able to go.
And the other is that conservatives should be shut up. Well, dirty secret. Those are always the same two answers.
I don't think that conservatives should shut up. I invite any conservative to come on my show and talk to me. Please, please. I have been on conservative Reddit for months now, trying to get conservatives to come onto my show and talk to me. Do you know how many I've gotten? 3. I've gotten 3. And if you go into my my video history and look up Ask a Lefty, you will see how respectful I am when I talk to conservatives on this channel. Please come onto my show and talk to me. If you're worried about being live streamed, I will just come onto my Discord and talk to me. I won't live stream it. I won't record it. I just want to talk.
For every leftist problem, right? It doesn't matter what the predicate is. The conclusion is always the same. It's not if X, then Y. If any letter, then Y, right? If the sky is blue today, then America is systemically racist and conservatives should be shut up.
America is systemically racist when the sky is blue.
If you didn't tie your shoes this morning, then America is systemically racist and you should shut up.
Again,
right? These are
if I didn't tie my shoes, America's still systemically racist.
Argument, every single one. We'll get to Joe Biden doing this. I mean, it's deeply divisive crap. It's deeply divisive. This whole week has been so disappointing and horrifying in every way. We'll get to more of this in just 1 second. First, let's talk about the fact that you need to preserve your family memories. This is something important you can do for your family, right?
Oh, gosh.
For somebody forever. Videotape recordings weren't made. Watch them. Legacy Box. You can use their kit to save UD. A long box has helped create an additional 40% well supply. That Trump launched an assault on democracy from the very first day that he was in office, which means that all of his voters should have known this was going to happen. They're all guilty.
He did. He claimed that there was voter fraud in the first election.
Along with him, of everything that is going on. This, by the way, is not an uncommon talking point on the left, as we'll see. He also suggested that the Capitol Police are viciously racist. Now, you may have looked at the incident at the Capitol and seen a bunch of white people storming the Capitol, one of them getting shot, a bunch of people going to get arrested. And you may have said to yourself, look, it looks like Capitol Police were overwhelmed. I can't believe they didn't have enough people there. Looks like security protocols need to be overhauled. Or you could be an insane person and suggest this has something to do with systemic American racism. Naturally, Joe Biden is going to do the latter.
No one can tell me that if had been a group of Black Lives Matter protesting yesterday, they wouldn't have been treated very, very differently than the mob of thugs that stormed the Capitol. We all know that's true. And it is unacceptable. Totally unacceptable.
No, we don't.
I didn't see where he made that a race thing, Vin. He said Black Lives Matter protesters. Black Lives Matter protesters come in all colors. As a matter of fact, a lot of the protests that I went to felt like it was mostly white. Like, so nobody's making that a race thing.
We all know that's true.
Except for you.
Because it's nonsense. It is nonsense. The entire media apparatus, the entire governmental apparatus, cities around the country allowed BLM free reign in their cities.
Not true.
They painted the city streets. They paid homage. They marched with them. Mitt Romney was marching with BLM, for God's sake. Don't give me that if BLM had done something like this, well, that would have been, I mean, I can't even imagine. If BLM had, they burned cities. Okay, like, what are you talking about? They ran roughshod through Kenosha. And the media cheered. The media suggested this was all just an outburst of passion because of systemic American racism. And now you're saying this is somehow about Capitol Police being racist. And then Kamala Harris, another unifying figure. Get ready for the unity breakout. By the way, again, these two arguments are sort of the same, right? There's the America's systemically racist and you should shut up. All of this is papered over with the talk of unity. Because I'm not going to unify with either of those propositions. But the idea is that if you don't unify with those propositions, you are the one breaking unity. Because it is perfectly obvious to everyone that this was somehow about race. In no way was this about race. What?
The one making it about race, Ben.
Saying exactly the same thing.
Oh my gosh.
We witnessed two systems of justice.
Oh, F you.
When we saw one that let extremists storm the United States Capitol, and another that released tear gas on peaceful protesters last summer.
Ooh.
The American people have expressed rightly outrage. We know this is unacceptable. We know we should be better than this.
Okay, so I have a question. I mean, really, I have a serious, logical question here. So, according to Kamala Harris, should the police have used tear gas on the protesters at both? Or should they have used tear gas on the protesters at neither? Serious question. Because
I don't know what Kamala Harris thinks, but I think that it's the latter. That's the one, right? Yes. So when I say, and I posted this on Twitter earlier, when I say, when I compare the two, and I talk about how bad BLM was treated, and how the police treated the rioters with kid gloves, I think. Well, to be honest, I think that the rioters could have had a much more aggressive police response against them, and it would have still been appropriate. But most importantly, I think that the BLM protesters should have been treated much better by the police.
because in reality, they used tear gas on the protesters both, right? And the rioters at both, right? In reality.
They used tear gas on the rioters long after they broke into the Capitol.
The police have been pretty consistent with regard to their use of force here. And they did use probably more force with regard to the Capitol. A person got shot and is dead.
A person got shot after she got close to elected officials. Like, what are you talking about, Ben? It took her threatening the lives of our elected officials, not explicitly, but implicitly, threatening the lives of our elected officials before she got shot. I'm surprised she's the only one that got shot for real.
They used more force at the Capitol than they did with regard to BLM protests all around the nation.
Not
There
true.
are pictures of the cops literally standing by and just letting people run around burning businesses. Okay, but put that aside. just on a purely logical level. When she says that we have a double system of justice here, where protesters were gassed in front of the White House if they were BLM, but then they were not gassed if they stormed the Capitol, is the idea here that we should have let the people storm the Capitol and we should have let people protest freely with burning churches near the White House? Like, which one is it? Should we have tear gassed both? Because, again, there's no logic to this. The entire thing is a divisive, emotional appeal.
If a BLM protest starts rioting, people don't typically have a problem with the police acting in kind. What we have a problem with is when police start tear gassing protests before the riots got violent.
Designed to suggest that everybody who supports Trump and supported Trump back during the election cycle, no matter what he did over the, and no matter whether you think that the people who breached the Capitol are idiots and criminals, that no matter what you do, no matter what you said, you were complicit. And not only were you complicit in the violence, you are complicit in racism, right? You are a racist as well, because America is racist as well. It's horrifying stuff, because again, this is a moment where we should all agree on the things. I don't know how.
So, you can be a part of a racist system and still not be a racist person. It's something else that's a part of, I think this is part of critical race theory, that Ben Shapiro, I guarantee you, has zero understanding of. You can be a part of a racist system and not be a racist person. Everybody has implicit racial biases that work into making the racist system. Even I have caught my biases many times, and I've tried to change them, but they're still there. Some of them I know about, and some of them I don't. So, like, when we say that America's a racist system and that you're a part of it, it doesn't mean that we think that you are a racist person. It doesn't mean we think you explicitly hate black people or explicitly hate Mexicans. It just means that you are a part of a racist system. That's it.
How many times over the past several years I've said this, where there's an issue that happens, and I'm like, you know what, seems like we should all be able to agree on this. And then you poll Americans, and they do all agree on it. And then our politicians, and I think sometimes on both sides of the aisle, but at this point, really on the left with this kind of stuff, then the politicians immediately turn it into something political. Right? When it comes to COVID, it was like, why is this political? We're all trying to deal with a global pandemic. And then
that was a right-wing thing. They turned it political.
Immediately it turned into America systemically racist. Like, what the hell?
America is systemically racist.
Right? Again, COVID. The two solutions from the media and from your Democratic politicians were America systemically racist and shut up. When it comes to crime.
No. What? Our politicians did not bring race into COVID except for where it was appropriate, because minority groups are more affected by COVID than majority groups are. That is a fact. Yeah, that is a fact. But the left's response to COVID wasn't this is a systemically racist thing. Where the left's response to COVID was, Donald Trump, what the hell are you doing? We need tests. We need you to stop discouraging people from wearing masks. We need you to stop downplaying the virus. It's going to be serious. It is serious. Why are you still downplaying the virus? We need money. We need to support counties that are shutting down financially. We need to support the people that can't work. It was those kind of things. Trump was the one that made this political. If he had from the beginning taken the virus serious, not make wearing a mask a political thing and encouraged it so that his sycophants wouldn't be thinking that it was some huge breach of their freedoms to have to wear a mask in public. If he had told America that this is going to be a deadly pandemic and that we're going to need to take steps to try and mitigate the harm that are going to be hard for people, but we will get through this as Americans, and the federal government will do whatever it can to help. And he did that. He got tests to localities. It would have been a much different election. Donald Trump would have won. For sure, without a doubt. But he made it into a political thing. And it cost lives. Hundreds of thousands of lives. I'm not going to put every single COVID death on Trump. Some of it is on some of the mayors who made stupid ass decisions. But Trump and his poor handling of Corona cost lives. And it's because he made it political.
climate change, it's America is systemically racist and shut up. When it comes to tax policy, it's America is systemically racist and shut up.
None of that's true. Climate change, we need to hamper our carbon emissions and encourage the rest of the world to do so. Like, what the hell are you talking about, Ben? I can give you the left's talking points on every single one of these. You obviously do not know what the left believes, and yet you rail against it on a daily. Your title of this video is The Left's Payback or some shit.
Okay, so in a second, we're going to get to the second message here, which is shut up. Right? We've done America systemically racist. Now we're going to get to shut up in just one moment. First, let us talk about something new and wonderful. Again, every ad break is going to be a breath of fresh air throughout today's program and maybe over the coming couple of weeks. Let's talk about how you can get healthy in an awesome, awesome way. Let's talk about staying in shape. Nothing feels as good as that feeling of accomplishment. Tamira's rowing machine, and S is Echelon's competitors at heart. They have world-class instructors that are going to motivate you with thousands of days. It's just fantastic. And unlike only members, all work out if it's big into O-O-N fit with that E-H-E-L-O by the media, and it's been pushed by politicians, is shut up. Right? So the first part was America is systemically racist and conservatives are bad. And the conclusion, of course, is shut up. The conclusion is shut up. So Trump has been banned from Facebook indefinitely. Not only was Trump banned from Facebook, by the way, so Dan Bongino had his account removed on Facebook
He's also banned from Twitter now, so lol.
temporarily because he posted the video of Trump a couple of days ago during the riot talking about how he wanted people to go home peacefully and then adding in a bunch of stuff about how the election was stolen. So just for reposting.
He posted that he wanted people to go home peacefully, but then continued pouring gasoline on the fire that made people riot in the first place. Like, of course they banned him. What the hell are you complaining about, Ben?
A video from the President of the United States for just reposting it. His account was removed. Facebook has now announced that Trump's account is going to be completely removed from Facebook. Now, look, Facebook is a private company. Facebook can do whatever it wants to do. Does that mean that the spirit of free speech and civic engagement can thrive when you have big tech bros who have decided what is available to you and what is not available to you? And if you think this is going to stop with Trump, you are dead wrong.
The people on the right like to complain about these big tech companies banning people and how much power they have over public discourse. But what is your solution? They always make these complaints, which they could are big tech companies having all this power is a valid complaint. But I don't see anybody on the right coming up with solutions.
In a second, I'm going to show you how far this is going to go. Right? The truth is that Jack Dorsey and Zuckerberg, they've had their fingers on the trigger with regard to Trump for a very, very long time. And we all knew that basically the day after the inauguration, both of them were going to attempt to ban Trump.
Nice.
Well, they're going to do it a little bit early. According to the Washington Post, Zuckerberg said Thursday the social media giant is banning Trump indefinitely, marking a dramatic escalation of the conflict between Silicon Valley and the White House after Trump weaponized the web to help stoke a riot at the U.S. Capitol. That's the Washington Post. Zuckerberg wrote, "We believe the risks of allowing the president to continue to use our service during this period are simply too great. Therefore, we are extending the block we have placed on his Facebook and Instagram accounts indefinitely and for at least the next 2 weeks until the peaceful transition of power is complete." Okay, now, you don't have to agree with anything Trump has posted. Anything he has posted in order to recognize this is a horrific precedent, a really bad precedent. Imagine, during those BLM riots, if Facebook had decided, you know what, there's a lot of criminality and violence that's going around right now, like a lot of it. In fact, so much so that anybody who even mildly excuses any of the criminality or violence, anybody who tries to justify any of that.
There's a difference in excusing criminality and violence and like stoking the flames. Somebody with as much power as a president stoking the flames of the violence. Like, I am sure people got banned for calling for riots on these social media platforms. There were no elected officials that had the power, especially that had the power that Trump does, and certainly no elected officials that have less power than Trump does, that were calling on people to riot. They were stoking those flames. Elected officials were saying, "We hear you, and we are going to try and do something about it," and that is what they did. They weren't saying, "Oh yeah, black people are so oppressed. Minorities are so oppressed. Let's march on the Capitol." They weren't calling for anything. But Donald Trump did.
That stuff. Even if they say stay peaceful, but they try to justify that violence, or they say the underlying argument is good, we'll just ban them. Because after all, the risk of criminality is higher than the value of the free speech. Right? How would that go? You think that'd be good for the country, or very, very bad for the country?
So I guarantee you Donald Trump or anybody could go on Twitter and make this argument and still be okay. They could say something to the effect of, riots are bad, but if you put yourself in the shoes of somebody who thinks that the election was stolen from them, then you can understand a little bit more why they think that rioting would be appropriate. That is the same argument that the left uses to justify the riots on BLM. That argument goes something like this. Riots are bad, but if you are a part of a people that have been oppressed for decades and very little has changed in your lifetime to mitigate that oppression, and it seems like nobody is listening to you, then I can understand why people would think that rioting would be appropriate. You can make both of those arguments on social media and still be okay. I don't think that social media is banning people from making appropriate justifications, which I would just call explanations, on why people are rioting.
Shutting down the
Anyways, I think that I'm going to be done with this video soon because we're only halfway through and this stream has already been an hour and 14 minutes long. I don't really want to stick to Ben Shapiro. I kind of want to talk about other things tonight and play some video games, so.
Modes and mechanisms of conversation is a bad idea. If Facebook believes itself to be an open source for communication, opening minds to ideas, it can't put itself in the business of banning ideas or banning figures, even if Facebook doesn't like what they are saying. According to the Washington Post, Facebook
has been one of the most lenient large social media platforms to the president.
Penalty any social media company has meted out to Trump over his 4-year term, a period in which he has repeatedly peddled falsehoods, attacked critics, and spread divisive rhetoric online. Twitter on Wednesday also suspended Trump for 12 hours. The company's first ever blockade lifted on Thursday morning. By evening, Trump resumed tweeting, sharing a video that acknowledged the new administration soon to be inaugurated. The tech giants took the rare aggressive steps after a violent mob stormed the House and Senate Wednesday, forcing lawmakers into lockdown. Now, the reality is that if Trump had won the election, this wouldn't have happened. Right? If Trump had won, they wouldn't be banning his accounts. The reason they're banning his accounts is because they're attempting to, in pretty cynical fashion, stave off legislation from a Democrat-led Senate. Even if the Republicans held the Senate, I think that they probably wouldn't have done this. The reason that they are doing this is because they believe that if they appease the Democrats, if they start using their tech platforms in order to shut down alternative points of view, then the Democrats will leave them alone. In other words,
that could be true, but also, like a lot of these companies will placate to the left because the left's ideas are popular.
If they just become part of the mainstream establishment media apparatus, echoing only the messages of the Democratic Party, then the Democrats will not regulate them. Senator Mark Warner said, "Well, I'm pleased to see social media platforms like Facebook."
But, I mean, so he takes it to an extreme. He takes the idea to an extreme. They could be banning Trump. What's up, sweet agony? They could be banning Trump in order to try to stave off some kind of legislation that's in the works. I don't think that the left has any legislation in the works. I know that the far left supports legislation to kind of rein in the power of these big tech companies. But I don't think that the establishment left actually supports those things. But he's making it out like the right-wing ideas are just being censored left and right, and that's just not the case. Right-wing ideas are just typically unpopular. So, like, it gets criticized when they do get posted, but they aren't getting censored. There's many right-wing ideas that get left on social media sites. And I'm sure that there are a lot of left-wing people that get their shit banned because they will advocate for things like violence and shit. The only difference is that you don't really hear them bitching about it.
Twitter and YouTube take long-belated steps to address the president's sustained misuse of their platforms to sow discord and violence. These isolated actions are both too late and not enough. Disinformation and extremism researchers have for years pointed to broader network-based exploitation of these platforms. There we go. That's where it is. So Mark Warner is saying, basically, anybody who has ever in a video said anything good about Trump or even didn't say anything about Trump, but somebody...
It's not... He didn't say anything good about Trump. Hold on. I'm on YouTube right now. I'll test this out on Twitter. I can say something good about Trump and not get banned. What is something good about Trump? Oh, Trump signed a budget bill that allowed the CDC to use their injury funds, I think it's called, to research gun violence. Before 2018, the CDC were not allowed to use their government funds to do research on gun violence. But Trump signed a budget that allowed that to happen. That's good. Good for Trump. Base Trump. Yes. Now, I just said that. I'm on YouTube. I guarantee you I'm not going to get banned. I guarantee you if I post that on Twitter, which I will, I won't get banned.
Watched their video and then watched your Trump video? We can look at the research. The research, by the way, is nonsense. We can look at the research and we can see...
Oh, gosh, the research is nonsense. The research is nonsense. What in the hell is he talking about? Do you have research that counters this research? I would love to see any type of right-wing research that counters any type of left-wing research that I have. See if it's peer-reviewed and to what extent it's been peer-reviewed. And, gosh, And usually when a right-wing person cites research, when you actually go into the articles that they are citing, it says the complete opposite of what they are saying. That's why the right doesn't like academia. Like academia reveals reality, and reality just has a left-wing bias. I'm sorry. It's just the way it is.
See that these mainstream commentators, the Jordan Petersons or the Dave Rubins or the Ben Shapiros or the Glenn Becks, that all these people, they're part of the problem. All you're going to have to do.
They are. That's true. I put more blame on these type of people than I do the individual Trump supporter, because these type of people are spreading misinformation that is getting people to believe the things that they believe, that gets them to act in the way they do. So yes, all of those people are a huge part of the problem. OAN and Newsmax, huge parts of the problem.
Is just prevent all those people from speaking freely on social media. It ain't going to stop with Trump. It's going to start with Trump.
Misinformation, for sure. If they are posting lies, then for sure, yes, prevent them from doing it. There's a difference in posting your ideas, such as, what is a right-wing idea? We shouldn't have stricter gun regulation, and posting lies, such as the election was stolen. There's a difference in posting your ideas, such as Donald Trump should be president, he was a good president, and posting lies such as Dominion voting machines were rigged. Like yes, if these companies are taking down misinformation, I wholeheartedly support that. And anyone that cares about the truth should support that too.
Right? Jennifer Palmieri, Hillary Clinton's former communications director, tweeted, "It has not escaped my attention that the day social media companies decided there actually is more they could do to police Trump's destructive behavior was the same day they learned Democrats would chair all the congressional committees that oversee them." She happens to be correct about this. Now, Facebook and Twitter originally used to make exceptions for public figures with regard to some of their rules, which makes sense because how exactly are we going to know what they said and then hold them accountable?
I don't want public figures to be able to freely lie either.
It's amazing. It truly is amazing that the standards that are now being set up seem to assume there were no repercussions to Trump's behavior over the past 4 years. He lost the election. That seems like a pretty major repercussion, considering that he is the first president to serve only one term since George H.W. Bush, and the first president since Jimmy Carter term without a major third-party candidate taking 15-20% of the vote. But this is what the media want. The media are just, this is the beginning, right? This is the beginning. The beginning is they ban Trump, and then they ban you. That is the next thing to happen. For example, the Washington Post says, even though Facebook suspended Trump on Thursday, pro-Trump pages and groups with tens of thousands of members, including one called Joe Biden is not my president, which is hidden from public view, quickly mobilized in support. Facebook has cracked down on some of the most pervasive and violent conspiracy theories. The social media companies' belated efforts have also had the effect of pushing many of the group's leaders to...
I think I'm getting kind of bored of this. Is everybody else getting bored? I don't know if I want to do this anymore.